Hey y'all, and welcome to Granola and Grits Homestead. Today we're going to can potatoes. Now this video is not going to be a comprehensive video on canning, however I do plan to make a video on that soon. Today we are just going to talk about how to can these potatoes. I am also doing a voiceover with this video because my kids were all home today and there was absolutely no way that we were going to have any sort of quiet conversation for this video. However, you might hear my dog in this voiceover because she likes to be right up on me. So I've started off, we're just peeling some potatoes. We're doing 14 quarts today. So even though there's a 50-pound bag of potatoes right there on the table, we're only going to use about 10 to 15 pounds. It took about 3 potatoes, give or take a couple of chunks from another potato, to fill each quart jar. Make sure that you get the peels off because though some people say that you can unpeeled potatoes, the official recommendation is to peel them. Next, we're going to rinse off the potatoes. This gets off a little bit of the extra starches and also some of the grime and dirt from peeling. So we're just going to rinse them and scrub them a bit. Just using regular water is fine. Next, we're going to drain the potatoes, trying very carefully not to dump the entire bowl into the sink. Next, we're going to chop the not tomatoes, these are potatoes, completely different vegetable. We're going to chop the potatoes into about 2-inch chunks. Now I'm just eyeballing it. You just want them to be uniform, as much as you can, just so that they all cook kind of evenly whenever you're canning them. But don't stress about exact 2 inches. Smaller chunks versus super large chunks are preferable, just so that you get the most out of your jars. And as I am chopping them, I am just putting them directly into the canning jars. There is no need to parboil or pre-cook these. This is a raw pack method. I am using a recipe from the Ball canning book. It is super important when canning to only use tested and approved recipes to prevent foodborne illnesses like botulism. Also, take care to use proper knife skills. As you can see, I'm holding my knife at the base carefully, and I'm keeping my fingers curved away from the knife so that I don't chop my fingers off. Next, I'm adding salt to all of my jars. Now, the Ball canning book gives you recipes for 2-quart jars, so you just divide that in half, and that's how much you put in all of your jars. So I'm putting 1 teaspoon of canning salt. Do not use table salt when you can, because it can turn your vegetables black. So now I'm putting in half a teaspoon of black pepper in each jar. Next up is a half a teaspoon of thyme in each jar. And with these herbs, it's okay if you go a little over or under. These are all just for flavor and just for preference. This doesn't impact the safety of the recipe. Now, this jar says horseradish. It is not. I reuse my jars. That's rosemary, so it was half a teaspoon of rosemary. Next, we're topping off our jars with hot water. You can also use chicken or veggie broth for this, but I didn't have any on hand, so I'm just using hot water. You want to make sure that you're leaving 1 inch of head space in the jars so that you don't have boil over. And I'm using my headspace tool to check that. with this particular jar, I forgot to pack down the potatoes before I added the water in. So as you can see, some of my potatoes are sticking up over the head. So there, I'm just pressing them down. Next time I would want to add my water as I'm adding potatoes to the jar, because my potatoes did start to turn a little brown, but that was okay. And next, we're wiping the rim. You always want to make sure that you wipe the rim with a damp paper towel to make sure that there's no food particles on the rim before you place your lids. That way you can ensure a proper seal. And then we're just finger tightening the ring on. And continue on with the next jar. Now I'm loading my canner. I am using a Presto 23 quart canner, I believe, and this holds 7 quart jars. So I'm going to load 7 quarts in there. I'm making sure that they're not touching each other. There is about 2 inches of water simmering in the bottom of the canner. And then as you place your jars in, that water level does rise. And this is to make sure that you have enough water in your canner to keep the pressure and to not boil dry. Consulting my ball book to make sure that I'm not missing any steps. No matter how many times you can or you go through the process, you always want to make sure that you're following the rules in the recipe properly. And now we've placed our lid and turning the burner on a little higher. Once that spout starts venting, we'll set a timer for 10 minutes. As you can see, there's some steam coming out of that little valve. And once it starts shooting out that steam, you press the timer for 10 minutes. Once the timer's done, you set your weight on top. Now our canner has come to pressure just about. We're still just a little under pressure. We want, for a dial gauge, you want it to be at 11 pounds of pressure. I believe with a weighted gauge it is 10, but we're at 11 pounds there. So now we're setting our time. Quart jars of potatoes take 40 minutes to process at 11 pounds per pressure. Now our timer has gone off. It's been 40 minutes, and we're just going to turn the burner off, and we're going to let this sit. With pressure canners, you have to let the pressure release naturally. And once it's all the way down to 0 and the pin has dropped, you can remove the weight and open the canning lid. Always make sure to open the lid away from you so that the steam does not burn you. Using your jar lifter, carefully remove the jars from the canner. Now, sometimes this movement will cause the water to boil up really quickly and boil over. This is fine. This isn't going to cause any issues. As long as your jars seal, you will be okay here. But it's kind of like the same concept as a cold bottle of water and it gets hit and then it freezes. It's just like that. When you start moving the jars, the water will start to boil up really quickly. And this can be prevented by having just a little bit less liquid in there, but I do follow the instructions exactly and I leave an actual inch of headspace. I am placing the jars on a towel on my countertop carefully to make sure that they don't touch each other. And we let them cool on this towel for at least 12 to 24 hours before moving them. This gives the jars time to properly seal. You'll want to hear a popping sound as they're sitting there. And once the jars are fully cooled and the seals are complete, then you can remove the rings and store them in your pantry. And as you can see, that is the juice bubbling up. Thank you guys so much for watching, and y'all come back now, you hear?